Hey everybody, welcome. Today is October 31st, and this is a special meeting between Carvel and Operator Framework to do an introductory chat about Operator Lifecycle Manager and kapp-controller and packaging and catalogs and what sort of integrations we might be able to achieve. We do have a good number of folks on the call today and not a ton of time. So if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to propose we skip everybody doing intros. I will introduce myself at least since I'm talking. I'm Andy Goldstein. I'm one of the leads in Operator Framework, and I'm at Red Hat and have been here for a little while. I was at VMware helping out with Carvel in the past, so I know some of the folks there. I want to thank Nancy and Joao for agreeing to chat. So I think where we have been having a conversation to date is around the fact that Operator Lifecycle Manager, or OLM on our side, is similar in some aspects to some of the things that Carvel has in kapp-controller, but it's not 100% overlap. On our side, we tend to focus on operators, which I tend to just call Kubernetes native applications, things that have custom resource definitions, and they tend to do control loops. And I know on the Carvel side, kapp and kapp-controller are more generic. They can apply any YAML to a cluster, and there aren't necessarily any special affordances or code or logic around updating CRDs and not dropping storage versions and things like that. But we do both have catalogs, and we do both have packages or bundles or whatever you want to call them. And so I think that's where there's a good opportunity for some synergy. And I know Joe Lanford on our side and I have been chatting with Joao and Nancy about possibly adding some support to kapp-controller and kapp for some of the OLM formats that we have. So I'm going to pause talking and see, Nancy, if you'd like to do any sort of intro on your end, or Joao.
Sure. So I'm the community manager for Carvel. I'm also the community manager for build packs, but Carvel, I've been a community manager since I started at VMware in January 2021. And as a community manager, I'm more so focused on the open source component of Carvel users and maintainers, and collaborating with other open source projects and our presence in the cloud native space. So I help trying to coordinate and build those relationships on my end and offer support wherever I can.
Awesome, thanks. So I think there's two areas that we're initially interested in exploring in terms of integration. One of them is, can we work together to add support to kapp-controller for OLM's custom format, which we call registry v1. It's an OCI image or artifact, and it just has a specific layout, and combined with an API called cluster service version, when you put the two of them together, you can end up with a deployment, some RBAC, maybe a service account, a few other resources here and there, but essentially what makes an operator to deploy it to a cluster. So that's one area that we're interested in exploring. The second one is around the catalog format, or in Carvel terms, package repository format that we have with OLM. And we're trying to figure out, does it, on our side, would we use the packaging APIs that kapp-controller has, or would we stick with something else that's just OLM specific? If we do decide to use the packaging APIs, we would really be interested in adding support to kapp-controller for OLM's catalog or package repository format, which is called file-based catalog, or FBC. And those are the two areas I think that, unless I'm missing anything that you can think of, Joe or anybody else, where we'd like to see some support for OLM in the Carvel tools. And then additionally, we have some ideas for some potential feature requests that we would be happy to contribute as well into kapp and kapp-controller, such as making it optional to check and see if all of the actions that kapp needs to perform, like creating namespaces and deployments and anything else that it's going to apply, does the service account that kapp is using have permission to do all of those things before it starts? Because if it gets halfway through and encounters some resource that it just can't apply to the cluster, it's either left with an incomplete installation or a partial update. And in both cases, it would be better to check up front and not do any work versus leaving it in a half installed or half updated state. So there's definitely areas that we would love to collaborate on like that as well.
I raised my hand and then put it back down, Andy, because you were mentioning other features. Another one that we have an interest in is dependency resolution. And I've heard that you guys also may have an interest in it, but maybe haven't progressed on it so far. So that'd be another area that we'd be interested in collaborating for sure.
So I guess Carvel folks, any thoughts or reactions?
And maybe one other little bit of context. I've got PRs. I've got one PR up in the kapp-controller repo that's a POC for adding an OLM registry templater. And I think Andy has an issue where I reference it. So I don't know if you guys have seen that. I don't know, Andy, if you have the link super handy. I don't myself right now, but
I can get it.
So that would be one place to look if you haven't seen that yet, for a very high level proof of concept of what we have in mind for that integration at least.
So before, I think maybe Joao and Praveen and Neil probably can talk a little more about all the PRs and all that are up. But I'm super excited. First of all, I want to say I'm really happy to see this collaboration. Thank you all for putting the time together. I think this is very good progress that I think is happening, and really excited to see this move forward. There are, I think, a few thoughts that Joao and Praveen also have in regards to how kapp-controller can be made extensible, and I think I would let them speak more on that. However, just wanted to say, really excited to see this moving forward.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm Joao. I'm the lead for Carvel. I'm part of VMware. I'm currently leading the team that is developing Carvel as well. And yeah, as Rena said, like, we are pretty excited to have folks that are interested in the project and that are interested in contributing to Carvel. And the idea that we can, like, introduce in Carvel features that could allow other like extend kapp-controller can allow other folks that are using other frameworks to also use Carvel. It's something that has been like part of Carvel itself, right? Like, one of the first things that we did was we add support for Helm, right? Like it's not like specific from Carvel, and we try to make sure that we can reach people wherever they are as much as we can, right? So this is pretty exciting for us as well. In terms of like feature specific, I think we can like talk a little bit more about that, but some things. So like I think personally, what I would like to see, I think this is going to be like quite a big change for kapp-controller and for the packaging APIs and so on. So I think we should have some sort of like a proposal before we dive into code and to like understand like how things will be put together and so on. Like, but I think we should agree, like if there's going to be any kind of API changes and so on, we should agree that beforehand so that we can have a better understanding, and then we can just geek out on how we can make that happen, right? Internally in terms of code. But so some of the things, yes, that. So in terms of like the what you were talking about, Andy, about like the feature for kapp that would allow you to like check first if you have like a ability to create a resource and so on. I think you already create those issues. I think that's totally fine. Like as Praveen was commenting on that, we should be mindful of API server because kapp-controller heavily bombards the API server on short bursts because it needs to collect like all the information that exists. So we need to be a little bit cognizant that maybe that behavior cannot be enabled by default. But we can have like a way to make it enabled, right? And you can just enable it for some particular cases and for people. So like in some sense, what we try to do in terms of Carvel is the ability that we have in each particular tool, we are pulling them out and like making them available in kapp-controller in some way, but we try not to be like have all the availability because people maybe don't need it, or maybe it makes sense for it to be used as a standalone tool, but not as part of kapp-controller. So that's another thing that we can see. And to address the part that Renu was talking about, we are in a spot right now where, like internally in VMware, we are going to, kapp-controller is going to have a role in the new world that is going to require us to be, I think, more performant than it is right now, and it is going to force us to get it to the next level. And for that, we are trying to think a little bit. We haven't started yet, but we're trying to think like how can we make this architecture that we currently have a little bit more scalable. Like we're just thinking about like can we scale it like horizontally? Is there any way that you can scale it vertically? Like what is the best way? Is the current architecture a good architecture for us to move forward with, or would it make sense for us to do like a little bit of a change on the architecture so that we can scale parts up and scale parts down, for example, or have a little bit more flexibility on our, I'm going to call it this, but it's not like the name of it, but our pipeline, right? Like we have a pipeline that is like a fetch template deploy, right? Would it make sense for us to allow people to have like other steps in the middle or something like that they need to do something like in between fetch and template? Like right now, kapp-control does not allow you to do that, right? So one of the things that I'd like to see us start thinking about is like about the scalability. How can we scale kapp-controller, and is there a way that we can make it more also customizable for people that are using it? So if they want, for example, we do have like an example for that is we do have somebody that asked for the ability to use the Git repo from Flux to fetch to fetch to fetch like from that Git repo, from that custom resource, right? Instead of going to the Git repo and having to have like credentials duplicated. Like that's a good example of something that we can implement that currently, right? Like we can just rejigger things a little bit. We can change vendor a little bit to make this happen. Or would it make more sense for kapp-controller to have this in a little bit of a different way, right? So those are kind of the things that are in the back of my mind when I think about the future of kapp-controller and where I would like kapp-controller to go to. Of course, it's not something that happen like day to night, right? Like it's going to require some thought and to make sure that we are doing the correct step forward. So that's something that has been in the back of my mind and that I'd like us to think a little bit more. So this is more or less where I think Carvel is right now. We are maybe in a good place for us to have like an input of folks like y'all from OLM to like how can we move this forward in a little bit of more customizable way, in a little bit of more like scalable way as well. So I think this is like a great timing for all these things to happen.
Okay, thanks for sharing all that, Joao. I will say that one thing that we're interested in is coming up with a path to getting the APIs to beta and having a sense that there will be fewer breaking changes coming. And I'm not saying that to try and rush either side, because the OLM APIs that we're working on right now are alpha and the Carvel APIs are alpha. So we both have ways to go before we get to beta, but it is something that is top of mind for us as we are trying to create a next generation architecture for OLM, specifically in OpenShift, but also as an upstream open source CNCF project. So we'd like to have some amount of stability or at least a plan for it in place. And hopefully we can work together with Carvel on that, at least for kapp-controller.
So we haven't run out any of our tools, right? We are in that situation where like everything is V1 Alpha 1 in terms of like custom resources, and even like if you go through the configurations, like if they're like specific configuration, like for example, like image package has specific configuration and they are all V1 Alpha 1 or Vineyard and so on, right? But one of the things that even though we are V1 Alpha 1, we try to make sure that we are always backwards compatible, right? Like for whatever we do, we try to when we make choices of adding anything, like till this point, we haven't removed anything, so that has never been a problem. But every time that we try to add something, we try to make sure that the defaults make sense and so on. So even though we are still in V1 Alpha 1, our mindset is already like if this was some sort of like a more beta or a more like stable product. And I'm not talking specifically on kapp-controller, I'm talking about like in the full suite, right? Sure. That has been like our mindset since the beginning. But definitely, personally, I think some of our tools are in a state that are like pretty mature, and like a good example for that is kbuild, right? Kbuild is a tool that hasn't got like a new feature and is like stable and it's being used as it is for almost a year now, right? So it's almost like in a 1.0 state, even though it's in a 0.30 something state. We continue like revving it up to make sure that Go is up to date. There's no CVEs and stuff like that. But yeah, so personally, I think maybe it's time for us to start thinking about like upgrading our tools into a more visible state, visible stable state. Let's say it like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I know that, or I think one of the motivations for putting together this meeting was specifically, excuse me, around OLM's catalogs and the fact that in addition to saying we have a a community catalog and a certified catalog and any other custom catalog out there within a catalog, again, which is synonymous to package repository. For each package, there is the concept of a channel, and the channel is a way to subdivide each package into one or more, I don't have a really great word for it. There's like, you can have a stable channel, you could have a beta channel, a nightly channel, a version 3 channel. You can name them whatever you want. And within a channel, you can specify ways to upgrade from one version to another in terms of what's allowed, what's required, what can you skip. So it's kind of like Semver, but not actually Semver. It's very deliberate and specific in codifying, okay, you can go from version 1.1.3 directly to 1.4 or something like that. Or no, you have to go from this version to that version and you can't skip anything. And if we work together to add support for OLM's catalogs to kapp-controllers, packaging APIs, and we want to use package install, we most likely will need a way to specify optionally when you're creating a package install for Postgres, whatever, please optionally make sure that the package that you select comes from the stable channel or the nightly channel or whatever I put in there. And I know, Joao, we had talked about that and introduced you to the concept of channels. And I think part of today's call was just to discuss that in more detail and see if that was something that would be okay to add if we decide we wanted to go down that route.
I think so today package install, the CRD does provide a way for you to select what is the range of Semvers that you want to install. Like, for example, if you have like the same package in like 20 versions, you can select like what is the version that you want to install or what is the range of the version. So something that I was thinking is, on the same spot, we could implement something similar for channels, right? Like where you have something specific and say like, instead of me providing a Semver version that I like or a range, I can provide, instead of providing a range of Semver that I want to install, I want to provide this thing that is called like a channel, right? And that would require then the package in some way to know, like the package that is being installed to inform kapp-controller that this is the channel that they are looking for, right? So a way that I was thinking like about this in a more like generic way, it could be if the package has a label that contains like the channel or the channels, then what the package install could look like is that you can say, instead of me selecting a Semver, I can select based on a label, right? And have like a label selector, and you say like, this is the label that I'm looking for, and this is the value, right? So the typical value matcher from Kubernetes, right? So that's something that you can make it generic, a little bit more generic, instead of being like, oh, this is something specific from from OLM, right? But it would just have the same flavor, right? Like, and that way you can expand that to whatever you want. And then after that point, if you want to do channels, you can do channels. If you want to do a different like streams or something, the only thing you need to do is just mark your package as this is the path, this is my label, and then just install via it. So that was something I was thinking in terms of like possible solution for this.
Go
I
ahead,
think
Joe.
that definitely covers the set membership part of the question. I think the other piece of this that is a little bit difficult is that in OLM, channels can each provide different upgrade graphs, essentially, right? So my alpha channel might let you upgrade to a version that my stable channel doesn't let you, even if both versions are in the channel. So it's essentially like channels sort of define both the membership of which bundles are in the channel, and also which upgrade edges between those bundles are in the channel. So I don't know if Andy or Joao, you have talked about that aspect of it, but that's another piece that at least if we wanted backwards compatibility with OLM v0, we would need some affordance for that edge thing as well.
Yeah, I think this is another area where some sort of document that goes into detail and proposes how this would work. If we can get the label selector going and make sure that we have those restrictions in place that you were just talking about, Joe, definitely would be worth trying to write that out before just diving into code.
Yeah, definitely, because that's kind of like API stuff, right? And when we agree to the API, we can decide like how we're going from like one place to the other, right? Definitely, that is definitely I think somewhat like a different challenge from what we had till this point, because till this point, the assumption was that every time that you install something, that something gets installed, right? And if you upgrade, it's because you change the version that you wanted, or because there's a new version. There's no, like, till this point, there was no concept on the APIs or on the on kapp-controller itself, like, oh, this is a path of upgrade, right? So that's something that is something new that we need to discuss a little bit more, like what would this look like in a kapp-controller world? Right?
Sorry to interrupt, Joel. Nancy, thanks for the prompt on the time. So we do have just about a minute left. Josh, is it super quick?
I just wanted to mention, you guys are all doing this over the top of OCI, and there might be opportunities within OCI to do some of this stuff. I know that that might be a distraction right now, but I just wanted to point out the image index, which, for example, has an array of image manifests, which could be the set of eligible upgrades. I'm just saying, like, there might be room to fit into OCI. That's what some of the stuff that's happening in my group is right now. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can look into that. Thanks. Okay, so next steps, I think we can make sure on our end that if we have any ideas for feature requests and collaboration, we'll get issues filed in the right repos and make sure that on the Carvel side that you're aware of them. If it would be helpful, we can certainly set up another time to chat. I know, for example, OLM has weekly meetings at 11 a.m. Eastern, so an hour prior to the start of this meeting, and those are on Tuesdays. I assume on the Carvel side, you all have regular syncs as well, so we could maybe take one of those time slots for a follow-up if we want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I also am curious, while we won't have too many people from Carvel at KubeCon, is OLM going to be in, or is Operator Framework going to be at KubeCon next week?
I won't, but Joe or anybody else on our side, do you know if
we've got
who's attending?
Representation from Java Operator SDK and Operator SDK. So no one from OLM is going to be there.
Okay. Then scratch that. But I think the following week, so next week we'll be busy with KubeCon, and then the following week we can set something up for our community meetings.
How about if we just coordinate in Slack for that?
Sure.
Okay,
Sounds good.
I see one hand up. Is it Renew? Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, that's me. So I wanted to just ask about the proposal and document for this. Can we start off on that before the next meeting so that we can collaborate to see how this can be agreed upon in a larger way?
Yes, I think that would be part of making sure that we have issues filed and documents started or shared scratch pads. I'll work with Nancy to make sure that we have all of this stuff set up and visible for folks who want to participate.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, Gavin, let's maybe touch base offline. I actually want to be cognizant of people's time. So thank you all for joining. It was nice to meet folks I hadn't met before. I hope this is the start of something pretty awesome. And keep an eye in Slack and various places for updates on where we're going to take this next. And for those of you who are going to KubeCon next week, have a fantastic time. I wish I could be there with you. So thanks, everybody. See you later, and happy Halloween if you're celebrating. See you all.
Thanks.